So where we left off was women in the post-war world. So women, because they are now going back to the houses, they do have a lot of kids, so we'll have a baby boom generation. But by the 1960s, people start doing a lot of family planning where they only have maybe 2 kids. You're not seeing a 3, 4 kids in a family anymore. Women do start going back into the workforce because they don't have to care for as many kids anymore. So when your kids go off to school, some women will go back to work. Women will get paid less than men for the same work, and then because of that, we're going to get the feminist movement. So the feminist movement are the search for liberation. It kind of starts with Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique and Boulevard's The Second Sex. What you see is that women are starting to question, like, is this it? Is, all I do is go, stay at home, make sandwiches, make beds, clean clothes, is this all there is for me? And because women start questioning that, you kind of see more women going to college. You see more women starting to take these powerful positions. So the transformation in women's life, birth rate goes down, even below replacement levels in Europe. So some people in Europe will only have 1 kid. But you got to understand that if a woman wants to go to school and have a career, she's not going to focus on having a whole lot of kids, if having any kids, So you'll see that. Working women, it's going to be on the rise. You see a lot of women having jobs during this time period. More professional opportunities are allowed, so women are going to be able to go to law school, medical school, government jobs, jobs in big business areas. But there's still the pay inequity, so there's an economic inequity that still prevails. Feminists are going to demand legalization of contraception and abortion, so you'll see, like here in the United States, Roe versus Wade is the abortion case, and contraceptive birth control. So women's studies and courses in the universities are going to increase. So there will be a lot of women during the 1960s who will study liberal arts. They'll study women's literature, women's history. This is when these kind of programs start. Then there's a very active anti-nuclear movement and ecological movement. So you'll see environmental movements, and you'll see people not wanting nukes to continue being built. And a lot of that is going to be women actively participating in those movements. Then there's international women's movements are going to also develop. So women in like European countries or in the United States will believe that it's their mission to also help women in other less developed nations. So in the 1970s and 1980s, we're going to see terrorism growing. So you'll see left and right-wing terrorists. The creation of Israel happens after World War II is over, so that's how we get Israel as a nation. But Israel is a nation that is built on Palestine. Palestine was originally there, and Israel will be declared over Palestine. When Palestine ceases to exist and it becomes Israel, the Palestinians are put on a very slim portion of the land. The Gaza Strip. And so there's going to be some Palestinians who do not care for this. And it's not just in Israel that they won't care for it, it'll be other places as well. So the Munich Olympic Games in 1972 is where Israeli athletes are going to be killed by Palestinian terrorists. Now, please understand, what you're noticing with the Olympics is originally the Olympics, when they reinstituted it at the late 1800s, is to get international cooperation. But by the 70s and 80s, you don't really see international cooperation as being like a big significant part of the games. It's more like international competition. You had the Munich Olympic Games here in 1972, where you have Israeli athletes being killed by the Muslim terrorists or by the Palestinian terrorists. And then, you'll have the Olympics in Moscow, where the people of Russia won't even come out because they're afraid to come out and get influenced by the bourgeoisie, by the foreigners who are there. So, and then the last Olympics in China, you even had issues with that because the Chinese, they had that one little girl singing the song, but that was not the girl that was actually viewed on television. So the person who was singing, that we saw singing the national anthem for China, that wasn't really the girl who was actually singing. So we had a lip singer. And this is just something I want you to know about the Olympics, because a while ago the AP World people threw an Olympic game question at you. Now, the militant governments in Iran, Libya, and Syria are going to support terrorism, and then we'll have the Pan American Flight 103, December 1988, that will be they'll take it, they'll die. The Irish Republican Army, the IRA, is also forming, and they would like to see a free Ireland, and so the IRA is going to use terrorist tactics as well against the British government to have a free Ireland. So terrorist attacks on the United States, September 11th, 2001, and that's against the World Trade Center. Almost 3,000 die in the attacks. Remember, the planes are hijacked by Al-Qaeda, who at the current moment was being run by Osama bin Laden. President Bush is going to launch a war against terrorism, and the NATO forces will help out. And it's going to drive militant Taliban from Afghanistan, so we won't have them anymore. We'll have it replaced with a democracy. And then we'll launch an invasion of Iraq when we think that Iraq is not being cooperative with the United Nations weapons checks, the factory checks that we were doing. So the West in Islam, Iranian Islamic Revolution in 1979. So in Iran, the Ayatollah comes into power after he defeats the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran is the guy who is technically in charge of Iran. Jimmy Carter allows him to come here to the United States for medical reasons because the guy's sick, and so we bring him in like a humanitarian thing. And the Ayatollah takes over Iran while the Shah is out. When the Ayatollah takes over, what he does is he goes ahead and kidnaps the American embassy in Tehran, holds our people hostage, and demands that we release the Shah back. We don't. Instead, we send in we send in operatives to get our people out. They end up getting kidnapped, so it's a huge failure. And in 1981, when Reagan makes the swear-in at office, that's when the Iranian hostage crisis is over, because the Iranian government releases our hostages at that moment. The United States will be involved in the Persian Gulf War. The Persian Gulf War happens because Saddam Hussein is in Iran. I'm sorry, not Iran, in Saudi Arabia. And when he's in Saudi Arabia, what he's doing, he's setting the oil fields on fire. The United States is friends with the ruling family in Saudi Arabia. Not only are we friends with them, but also what's happening in Iraq and in the surrounding area is that Saddam Hussein is killing the Kurds, and the Kurds are a nomadic tribe. He's killing them, and really a genocide is going on. So the United States will launch Operation Shield, and then we'll launch, our Operation Desert Storm. So Operation Desert Shield and Operation Desert Storm. Shield, at first, we're going to protect Saudi Arabia and protect the Kurds, and then Storm is when we'll actually push the Iraq army back into Iraq. The Iraq War in 2003 was kind of like a sequel, because after the Persian Gulf War, we tell Saddam Hussein, you can't have weapons of mass destruction, and you're going to let the United Nations in to inspect your factories and make sure you're not doing any biological weapons. Because what we found out was that Saddam had, he killed a whole village of people because one of the people from the village had tried to assassinate him. In the Iraq War, it really kind of fuels a very anti-American sentiment in the Muslim world or in the Arab world. And so you'll see, or you have saw that there's an increase in terrorist activity. Gets workers and immigrants. So when we look at labor shortages in Western Europe, it's going to lead to some resistance on, or some reliance on some foreign workers, but the resistance is going to start. There are a lot of Western European countries that do not want these guest workers in their country today, and they're doing anti-immigration laws to kind of push them back to their domestic homes. Remember that with France. There's resulting in new problems. You get a strain on your social services because of the guest workers and the immigrants. There's a lack of assimilation. Not all of the immigrants are going to become similar to the custom, the European custom. They'll keep their customs where they're from. So that's going to fuel some anti-foreign or anti-immigrant sentiments in a lot of these countries. European governments are going to start to pass those tough new immigration laws like France did. The environment and the green movement also starts during this time period, so we'll get environmentalists beginning around the world. A lot of it begins because of huge disasters that happen. So you're looking at pollution, you're looking at the water not being safe to drink, like the Love Canal, where you had all that nice pollution and people were getting sick, and it was in New York. And then Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986, and that was in the Soviet Union. And then you have a lot of green parties developing in Germany and Australia. Australia will have a huge green party. So what you're really seeing around the world in the 80s is kind of an environmentalist movement really taking root. Not just recycling. I mean, recycling is going to be a big thing, but you're going to see tighter restrictions on companies and tighter restrictions on companies that have records of pollution. So Western culture since 1945, we look at the post-war literature. When you look at the post-war literature, you're kind of looking at a literature where it's existentialist. They don't believe that the world is meaningful. They feel it's like meaningless. They don't necessarily look at God anymore, and humanity is alone in the universe, and there's no preordained destiny. So what you look at is after the war, people kind of become jaded, and they don't believe in this, whatever we are doing. Postmodernism are the relative nature of reality and knowledge. So post-structuralism are deconstruction. What you look at is all kinds of interpretations. There's no fixed truth or universal meaning in anything. Then you have these magical realism, and it's just like, oh, you know, here's the real of nature, you know, here's the reality. That's all they're looking at. Trends in art, you'll see Jackson Pollock, he's the guy who does the drip paintings, and that's abstract, and you see it for whatever it is. Andy Warhol is big. He's going to do pop art. So he does the Campbell soup cans. He does the one of Marilyn Monroe where she's in the different Technicolor colors. If you guys watch MTV, you know the Man on the Moon. He does that. He does a picture of that too. Postmodernism is in architecture was an eclectic mixture of past traditions. So you take some of the stuff from the past and you kind of mix it to form this new design. Science and technology really developed a lot after World War II. So we've had the radar, we've had self-propelled rockets, we'll have a computer, we'll have nuclear weapons, but as the Cold War is going, you really see a lot of technology developing. So we get a mix of our government and corporations developing. So government will give subsidies to corporations that are building things that are related to science and technology. Sputnik was the Soviet satellite, that's in 1957, so America will launch a satellite, and America will get to the moon first. So you'll have a space race. 2004, the Mars rover, Spirit, and Opportunity. So we're taking pictures of the different planets. So we're getting an interest in NASA, in the universe. We get personal computers, so your PC, and the internet is really going to help with a lot of the communication spreading. You do get some varieties in religious life as well. So the Catholic Church is going to have a little bit of a revival under John Paul II. What you're going to see is he's going to travel around the world. He goes to places that had not really tolerated the Catholic Church, but he's going to go there and he spreads the message. Fundamentalism is also going to start spreading, so we'll get a strict interpretation of the Bible and the Christian faith. So whatever's written, that's what they believe in. And it opposes Darwinism, and Darwinism, remember, is survival of the fittest, evolution. It doesn't like that. It doesn't like secular humanism. It believes that the religion should be a part of your government. So, and it's kind of helped a lot by Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, because Reagan really appeals to the Christian fundamentalists, and so does Bush to get elected. The growth of Islam, the Islamic fundamentalism is also growing, and it grows against the Western penetration in the Middle East and the Western influence in the Middle East. So you get Islam spreading in a lot of places, even in the West, so you'll see Islam spreading in Europe and in the United States. The explosion of pop culture, whatever the economic system is, if it supports pop culture, like a free market economy, that's where pop culture is going to spread. Movies, music, entertainment, all this stuff is starting. We get music channels. Sports and satellite TV are going to become big, so that's where you get ESPN, guys. This is me wrapping up as much as I can, as quickly as I can. That's just the pop culture stuff. So we're done with chapter 27.